Associate Director, Robert Huckabee, TAPPS Associate Director and Director of Compliance, and Brian Bunselmeyer, TAPPS Executive Director. Will Dixon from the TAPPS office staff is helping us out behind the keyboard. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for watching this video today. It's our hope that we'll be able to provide a little more information that you didn't have as far as the TAPPS rules and governance and what is TAPPS, especially in your role as the admissions or academic counselor. Again, we're joined by Steve Prudhomme and Robert Huckabee, our associate directors, and as we walk through, if you have questions, we hope that you'll email us at the end. We'll give you that email information later. So this is Academics and Academic Counseling 101. What is TAPPS? Well, TAPPS is the Texas Association of Private and Parochial Schools. We're a member-driven association which provides extracurricular opportunities for students attending our member schools. So your school has decided to become a member of TAPPS or has been a long-standing member of TAPPS, and as such, you fall under the TAPPS governance and guidance, and we look forward to serving you as you serve the students in your school. Steve, tell us a little bit about who TAPPS member schools are.
TAPPS member schools are a great variety of schools, actually. There's 238 high schools across Texas, from Beaumont to El Paso, Brownsville to Amarillo, from the small schools all the way up to those with 1,200 students. And if you look at the background, the types of schools that we have are religious, church-owned, independent, and aligned with other organizations. And again, these are great educational institutions. They're providing instruction and environments fitting the needs of their particular stakeholders. What does TAPPS do? I'll throw that over to Robert.
All right, Steve. Thank you very much. You might ask the question, what does TAPPS do and how does TAPPS serve our particular school? As Steve mentioned, we have 238 member schools. They're drastically different and very similar in some respects, but what TAPPS does, TAPPS aligns our schools for competition. TAPPS only governs high school competition. Many of our schools are K through 12. We have a lot of schools that are high school only, but our role at TAPPS is to align our schools for high school competition. We oversee that competition at the district level. We provide competition and championships at the state level, and then we govern the eligibility of our schools with regard to our coaches, our directors, and our students. Brian, tell us a little bit about those opportunities that TAPPS provides for us.
Basically, when you look at the TAPPS opportunities, they're going to be split between athletic and fine art. So, Steve, why don't you walk us through the athletic and the academic side here? What opportunities do we have out there?
Yeah, we call them extracurricular, but we prefer to say opportunities. And again, we have team sports, individual sports. We divide them up by seasons, fall, winter, and spring. But we also have a couple of events that we run in the summer. There's things called tournaments and for team sports and individuals, and each one of these are kind of approached in a different way. When it comes to the fine arts, which is very, like I said, something that we don't really talk about as much as we should, it's an incredible array of activities: academics and speech, art, cheer, dance, esports, music, both instrumental and vocal. We have one-act play, and we have robotics. And so there's a wide variety of opportunities provided by TAPPS.
When you talk about those academic and fine art and athletic opportunities, everything starts with our governance, and TAPPS is kind of the overseer of school eligibility, personnel eligibility, student eligibility, and able to participate at varsity and sub-varsity levels. We're all about rules compliance, and then unfortunately we're about sanctions if you are not in compliance. So the governance side of TAPPS is, again, establishing eligibility and making sure you maintain eligibility. In your role as the academic admissions person or as the counselor, what is your area of concern? Well, the major areas of concern are student eligibility, and are they going to run out of eligibility prior to graduation, or are they eligible in the first place, and how do I establish it? So check to see if there will be a conflict when a family applies, and that way there's no surprises later on in the academic career. So the earlier we find out where a student stands and are they going to have 4 years of high school, when do they turn 19, and some things like that, the earlier we find it out, the easier it is for you to break the good news or sometimes the difficult news. So Robert, tell us a little bit about the basic eligibility for a student to be able to participate in TAPPS.
Thank you, Brian. So Brian alluded to some of those what we call core tenets or basic elements of our eligibility in TAPPS for high school participation. One of those is a student cannot turn 19 before September 1 of their current year. If they've repeated some grades, if they started later when they were younger, a student could run into that situation where they turn 19 before September 1. That student would not be eligible to participate any longer in high school competition. Another one is students cannot have more than 4 years in high school. That's 4 years of attending high school. That begins to run from when they first enter the 9th grade. So if you have a student that's repeated a grade in high school, you look at their age and it's an issue there. Those are red flags that you want to look at and investigate and make sure those students either do or don't have eligibility, and you can advise those families accordingly. Students cannot have graduated from high school. A lot of our schools have students that come over, international students from other countries. The educational systems there are different than ours. They could be 16 years old and have already graduated in their particular country because their educational system is not identical to ours. Those are things that you can look for as you look at students who come in through your admission portal. And then students must be a full-time day student. We're going to talk about that more in detail here in just a minute. But as we navigated the pandemic the last couple of years, there was a lot of virtual and online instruction, either by individual students or an entire school for periods of time. They must be a full-time day student under our rules. So if you have that student that wants to take just some courses or a partial type of curriculum, those are things that you want to make sure they have eligibility or not within TAPPS. And then 19 before September 1. Let's talk about that one.
Well, that is a constitutional amendment, and again, as we look at this age, it's important that you follow through and check the age as you're going. If you go down to the next slide, you'll see that you'll be able to tell the student when they come in when their eligibility is going to run out. So it's important that you keep up with that. You check that in advance. You don't want that to be the August of senior year we find out you are not eligible. And so again, we have some things in place that can help you. Robert?
That's something that I do on a daily basis here in the office. I'm one of the staff members that looks through a lot of these applications for transfer student, international students, and that's just a little table we've created for people. That's a great little tool to have. You can look at a student. We're in the current 22-23 school year. If they turn 19 before that 9/1/2003, then they are too old to participate, and then those go through the subsequent years here. Brian?
I think it also reaches out there on that table and shows you when you start high school. So again, if they've started high school too early or early enough, and go back into that 4 years of high school. Steve, we've talked about 4 years of high school, but tell us what that actually means. Can I take a gap year? Can I not take a gap year? How do you see 4 years of high school?
Yeah, you certainly can, but the clock will start at freshman year, and then it clicks off for 4 years after that. So the date that you first enter into the 9th grade, it will go for 4 consecutive years, and at that point you are no longer eligible. Whether you're repeating a semester, a grade, the new thing we hear today is reclassifying, things of that sort. Again, the clock starts is the best way to put that, and it clicks 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, once they're all the way as a 9th grader. And again, they can take some high school classes when they're in junior high, and we can talk you through all that. You're also going to have homeschool students come in that brings in a little bit of variables that we need to work through, and then, of course, international students, and then kind of understanding when they started high school and what their systems look like. Robert, you deal with that on a daily basis. Is there anything else you want to say about international students and that part of it?
So we have, here in a minute, we'll talk a little bit more detail about international students. That's one of those groups of students that does need some additional application and review process. We'll discuss that more in detail. Let's jump to high school graduates. That's the next one on our list. You cannot have graduated from high school or received a high school diploma to be eligible to participate in TAPPS. That's typical in high school competition. This includes those international, students from overseas. It also can affect homeschool students. They've been in a homeschool system. They have a curriculum. They may have graduated, if you will, from their country that they're in or from their homeschool curriculum, but they're only 16 years old. They want to take some more courses. They cannot have graduated from high school or have a high school diploma to have any eligibility left in TAPPS.
I think sometimes, Robert, as you and I were both school administrators and we would get a youngster coming in from a homeschool, if mom or dad have combined and they've really moved them ahead, you do find a 12-year-old freshman, or you find somebody that's already taking that sophomore curriculum. So we just want to be very careful when we're inputting that we're putting it in the correct grade. If that's where their academics land, that's where their academics land. But that's also where their athletic eligibility and their fine art eligibility lands. So sometimes 12 may be going on 20 as far as the academic in the classroom pursuit, but maybe not so much on the extracurricular side.
Yeah, that's true. And what we're trying to help you with here, you don't have to know all the answers from day one, but you do have those categories of students that might, in your mind, say, you know what, I need to make sure this transcript lines up. I need to make sure this information is correct. And these are some categories of students where you'll need to pay special attention.
Communication, communication, communication. We're here to help. Your athletic director, our bylaws are all there to help give you some information. When we talk about earlier a full-time day student, according to TAPPS, a full-time day student is taking a minimum of 4 courses over the course of your semester. Those courses must count towards graduation. They must read for a grade, and they must count in the overall GPA. So office aid probably not going to count in the 4, but if you're given a grade for art or if you're giving a grade for Bible, those things are great courses to go through the 4. The other side is that the student is matriculating towards graduation from the member school. It's important to remember that they can be taking 4 classes at your school, but they also need to be moving towards graduation from your school. That means you're going to have to accept whatever homeschool or alternative school credits they're giving you as well. It's not just taking classes somewhere else to satisfy the 4. You have to be moving towards, especially if they're homeschooled to start with, moving towards graduation. We can give you a lot more information on that as it comes. The other side of the coin is students that did not start high school with you, but they have started high school somewhere else. They're now moving into your member school high school. So Steve, walk us through a little bit on transfers, exactly what we're talking about and why that's so important.
Yeah, transfers have some of their unique challenges, and they're going to need you to serve them well and give them the good information, because you are the first line of information, if this is done properly, and the first opportunity to deal with compliance with the TAPPS rules. It's important that you meet the athletic director, the registrar. Everybody needs to be on the same page with information and communication, going over these rules. And so when you're having kids come in and interview or have them come for an open house, it's important that you have a little bit of an understanding of the TAPPS rules, because these extracurricular activities are going to be an important part of their decision making. And so it's important that you guys are on the same page. So that information, those meetings, that connection is crucial. And I can tell you, as a longtime athletic director, we spend a lot of time with our communication and working through that, and messing up and having to scramble and catch up as well. So again, communication is key, and you've heard it from everybody around this table. Communication on the campus and with the TAPPS office.
Let's look specifically at what is a transfer student. Well, a transfer student is a high school student who leaves one high school for a new school. So if you have a student that's been attending another high school, they're already a high school student, and they transfer to your school, whether it's the beginning of the year or sometime during the school year, that classifies them as a transfer student. We get this question, what about an 8th grade student matriculating to the 9th grade? In general, those are not considered transfer students. There would be one exception to that. You could have completed the 8th grade at another school. You could actually begin fall practices. Right now, we're recording this on August 1st, so we're beginning our fall sports, volleyball, football, cross-country, fall soccer. A student could actually be at another school starting the 9th grade there, not entered classes yet because school hasn't started, but they could be working out with the football team or the volleyball team, so they have participated at that school. That would be the only example of an 8th grader matriculating to the 9th grade that could fall under that transfer category. It's really not that complicated. If you have questions, you can always reach out to us. But as you look at those transfer questions, what are some important things that you need to know from the admissions perspective? Number one, is the student in good standing at the previous school? Do they have any discipline issues at the previous school? Were they expelled from the school? Were they sent to an alternative school? Did they have other disciplinary reasons that might come up in the course of your interview and or testing process that would maybe be something you want to look into and get information from the previous school? That would probably fall in the normal course of things you would do anyway as new families and new students come in through the interview process. Is the student on grade level? We know reviewing transcripts is a part of your role there at the school. And as you look through those, make sure that they look in order, that there aren't any particular things that would raise concerns on your end. We know a lot of our schools do testing as part of their admissions process. Throughout that transcript review and testing process, are there extra classes that need to be taken to keep them on grade level or to get them up to grade level? We know those are things you deal with in the normal course of your job, but those are all things that can become a concern on the TAPPS level with regard to their eligibility. If the student participated in athletics at the previous school, that kind of falls more to the athletic director to follow up on some of those things and accumulate some of those forms. But those are things that as students go through the admission process, they do want to know the programs that are available at your school. Did they participate on a team or receive private instruction from any of the coaches or personnel at your school? Those are things that your AD needs to be in tune with, but in the admissions world, you can help raise those questions if you know that information's out there and make sure the right people know that and that they're addressing those concerns. One of the most important questions, what made you inquire of our school? Why are you interested in coming to our school? Why are you transferring from the school you've been attending? You need to know those things on a practical level, and some of those things could raise questions that might affect the student's eligibility that you need to know about up front while that family is interviewing and deciding. And while you are maybe making an offer for the family to come, those kind of things need to be answered before you get too far down the road. And then one more, most important question, if it's a senior transfer, we have specific rules regarding senior transfers and deadlines. Why are you moving? Why are you changing schools when you've completed 3 of your 4 years at high school somewhere else? And what is the interest in our school? Just normal things we know you would probably ask in the normal course, but just wanting to know that some of those can also raise eligibility questions from a TAPPS perspective.
I think the big key here is communication, communication, communication. There is no right or wrong answer, but sometimes a parent will give you a little information, a little insight, and if it talks about athletics or eligibility, this is a great time to get your athletic director involved so that they can ask some follow-up questions. And if it's a transfer student, when they ask the previous school for a form that has to be filled out, they'll have a little bit more information in their hand as to maybe why the student is showing up at this time. One of the things that has come up several times lately, and it happened way back in the 70s when I was in high school, was students who have reached that age of majority in Texas and are emancipated and living by themselves. So if you're 17 and the court tells you you're emancipated, or if you're 18 and you're going to go live by yourself in an apartment, that's something that your athletic director needs to know. While your school may accept a student under those circumstances, within the TAPPS rules, there's some very strict rules governing that, and we can definitely help walk you and your athletic director through that if the need be. We are there about the United States citizens who do not live with their biological parents. I was surprised when I became a principal how many students did not live with mom and dad. It's biological. They may be living with their adoptive parents, or they may be living with a family member, or some of them live in with a third party or have been placed there by the state. So the students who is not living with mom and dad, you've got a form to fill out. So if they present a birth certificate and someone says, hey, I'm grandma, or hey, I'm the aunt, or hey, I'm raising this child from my friend, those are things which do not necessarily preclude eligibility in TAPPS, but there is paperwork, and your AD can help you follow through that. And then there's students whose commute would require living with someone else. So if you're 40 miles away and it's Houston traffic or Austin or Dallas traffic, you're probably going to stay somewhere else on those late nights home on a Tuesday night after a volleyball or a basketball game. If it's 4 nights with somebody else and 3 nights at home, now you're somebody that's not living with mom or dad. You are actually staying away more times than not. So again, nothing precludes eligibility on its face value. It's just more questions, and once the form gets filled out, we can certainly help you with that. Robert, we also, in Texas, we have students who are not citizens of the United States, whether they be foreign exchange students or foreign resident students. Talk to us a little bit about that, because not all of our schools are certified by SEVIS, but some are. This would include students that are coming over a green card or mom or dad's visa. So talk to us a little bit about students who are not citizens of the United States.
So in TAPPS, we help you establish eligibility for all of your students, and one of those categories is international students. That's a student who is not a U.S. citizen. There are several categories of international students, as Brian mentioned. In all of those categories, we just need information. There is an application process. Your school is responsible to establish eligibility for those students. So as Brian mentioned, they might be a foreign exchange student. They'd be coming here for 1 year as a part of that program. They might be living with mom and dad who are transferred here with their job. They could be here living with a guardian, just getting that educational opportunity here in the United States. And we do have a handful of boarding schools in TAPPS. We have students that come in through the boarding school programs. There are some forms and documentation that we need to see as you help walk through that process. And there is an approval process where there's an application that has to be submitted. That's reviewed by our office. If everything is in order, then they certainly can establish eligibility. But there is a little bit of a time and process involved in that. We can certainly help you walk through that. Your athletic director is typically a part of that process as well in helping accumulate some of that information. They'll be coming to your office for copies of some documentation and things we need. But there is a process we need to help you walk through with regard to international students. One of the important things we have is our TAPPS database. That's how we collect and review all of our information. Steve, talk to our listeners a little bit about that TAPPS database.
Well, before we move to TAPPS database, I'm going to say as an old athletic director, please let the athletic director know of any international students that you have. Because even if they don't think they're going to play athletics or be involved in anything, if they decide in the spring, then all of a sudden you jump up in the spring and try to get all this paperwork done so they can play tennis or run track, it can be very difficult. So again, make sure y'all are all on the same page and share those names and look through that. So you're not in a crunch and a kid doesn't get to be does not get to compete because you just can't get it done in time. Well, moving on to the TAPPS database, and again, we've moved from file cabinets full of paper. We've moved into computerized programs, and we're into Rank 1 at this time. And Rank 1 has some good things about it in terms of the fact that you're going to have the families putting in information, the school and the coaches are going to be putting in information, and that stuff is not necessarily going to have to be brought in from your office like it was in former years, but we have to make sure that we get all the information into Rank 1. There's also this little thing called green and red. Once we get them on the eligibility roster, the name will either be covered in wonderful green color or it'll be in a red color. Red color means we're missing something, and so something has been triggered. And so the best part about Rank 1 is the fact that you'll be able to get that warning that something needs to be done. So it's important that we get everything in there, and it doesn't hurt to get all your students inside of Rank 1, whether they're going to be part of anything this year you think or not, and then you can move them around. So again, the Rank 1 accounts can do a lot for you and make sure that your life's a little bit easier and you don't make that crucial mistake and somebody is ineligible that you didn't mean to. Brian?
I think the important part about Rank 1 is we've had a database now for the last 12 years here in TAPPS. That's how your school establishes eligibility for each student and each coach. So while you have your own database or whatever, RenWeb or whatever you're using there at your school locally, we also need that at our level so that we can declare the students eligible and then the coaches going through the training they need to do. We've presented an awful lot of information. There's a lot to process. What do I do if I have questions? And I know folks will have questions. We're here to help. We are the overseeing governing body, but we're also here to provide help and assistance. Will, do me a favor and jump over to the TAPPS website real quick. That's www.tapps.biz. At the very top in that blue ribbon, you'll see the word bylaws. That's a quick way to walk back through. It's a very large file, but as you drop through, if people actually have direct questions, you can click on that file and drop on down. And then over on the right-hand side, you've got the calendar. and it does have the transfer deadlines and some things like that outlined. Those are dates that I think as a counselor and admissions folks I really do need to know. The other thing on the calendar, and I'll say this for academic advisors and academic folks, yes, we do know there's SAT testing and AC testing and IB testing and AP testing. And we do try our best to avoid those dates, but with the number of events, we host 29 weeks of events a year. It's a little hard to miss every date. So if their coach comes to you and says, hey, I think we're going to be really good in basketball, but it looks like that's going to be a conflict with the date, make sure that you can help the coaches understand when those dates are and how they might conflict with their season. So we're here to help, www.tapps.biz. We'll drop on back to the PowerPoint. Steve, any closing thoughts before we go to the contact info?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the better and the harder we work at communication on each and every campus, the more opportunity is going to be produced for these students. But it's going to take the hard work of everyone on campus, and then obviously our hard work here and communicating with us. So again, it's some give and take in that calendar and those calendar meetings. I've been in a lot of those. It's important that we listen to each other, because again, the better we work together and the better job we do, the more opportunity the young people will have and the better experience at your school.
Robert, how about you?
So we get a few calls a year from admissions and registrar people at our member schools. We love taking those calls. We know they're trying to get information. They're trying to help their families, help their students. As Brian mentioned, we all come from a school background. We served in leadership and administrative roles at TAPPS member schools, so we know what your world is like on a day-to-day basis. We are here to help and assist, and we know you are a critical part of those families coming into your school, you telling them a lot about your school, helping them walk through that process, and then also equipping them to be able to have all the information, all the resources they need to make good decisions.
I think the last thing that I would say in that thing is we are here to assist. Your athletic director needs to be in the loop. Your coaches need to be in the loop, but y'all all need to be in the loop. So from a school level, if a coach comes and asks for a GPA for a student because they're nominating them for academic all-state, we're here to walk you through that as well. Always love to hand out a little bling, give an award or two that the student have well earned. They've excelled either on the fine art field or on the field of play. So we look forward to that. So as we go forward, we jump to that last slide. Our website, www.tapps.biz. Our email info, info@tapps.biz. And our phone number, 254-947-9268. That information is up there. It is on our website. And again, we just invite you to call us if you have any questions as you move through your year. Obviously, we're at the beginning of the year. Like Robert said, this is August the 1st, but if it gets to January 1 and you're looking at transfer students coming in second semester or you're getting ready for next semester, we're all here to help as well. Thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for all you do to make the dreams of your families and your students come true.